Hello again. Welcome to American Movie Classics. I'm Bob Dorian. Today is Saturday, and today we're going to bring you some more of the best in movie entertainment. First, the classic follow-up to Frankenstein. It's called Son of Frankenstein, the 1939 shocker that stars Boris Karloff, Basil Rathbone, and Bela Lugosi. What a cast. The plot, of course, deals with attempts to clear the Frankenstein family name. Then Hugh O'Brian and Robert Evans are ex-convicts that become deadly enemies in the horror western called The Fiend Who Walked the West. This is a remake of the 1947 thriller called Kiss of Death. After that, we're going to see Irene Dunne and Myrna Loy, who star in the occult mystery 13 Women. A college sorority in this one forces a sister to leave the organization, and in turn, each fears for her life. Then Robert Montgomery and Carol Lombard star in the sparkling comedy Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It's about a couple who learns that their marriage may not be legal, and then the fun begins. It's directed by Alfred Hitchcock. I'll be right back.
I hate her. Her cool, poised character. Her rigid mind.
You'll never break her.
13 Women, Thursday on American Movie Classics.
Yes, I will.
Designers love to work on horror films because they can let their imaginations run wild. And that's how the art director, Jack Otterson, felt when he was assigned to do Son of Frankenstein. Now, designing Frankenstein's laboratory, as they used to call them in those days, was a lot of fun because he didn't have to confine himself to any particular style of architecture. At the end of the last sequel, you remember, Bride of Frankenstein, the lab had been completely destroyed, so Otterson was free to make a whole new creation all his own. Well, he built this lab around a deep sulfur pit, which took the technical crew 2 weeks to create. Every pit in a mad scientist laboratory has to boil and bubble. So air and steam were pumped in through garden hoses and then into a pit through a series of pipes, and that's what made those huge bubbles and heavy vapors rise out of the pit. Well, of course, with such a wonderful, seething, bubbling pit, somebody has to fall into it. But I don't want to spoil the ending of this film, so we'll talk about the problems that created after we see the film. Now, Son of Frankenstein was the third, and it was the last time Boris Karloff was to play the monster in a motion picture. If you remember the first Frankenstein, the monster had a couple of scenes in which the audience sympathized with him. That's what made it so special. Well, the Son of Frankenstein, the character is really a straightforward, one-dimensional type of monster without any of the sympathetic scenes that were in the original. After making Son of Frankenstein, Boris Karloff refused all other offers to star in another sequel. Here he is with Basil Rathbone in Son of Frankenstein. Well, that was not Boris Karloff who fell into the sulfur pit. It was a stuntman by the name of Bud Wolf. Now, remember, that pit was fairly deep, and as the monster, Wolf was wearing 70 pounds of equipment, including two 12.5-pound boots, and he had 40 pounds of metal throughout the rest of his body. In other words, he could not possibly swim, and he had to be helped out of the pit as quickly as possible before he drowned. Well, they got it in one take. Wolf fell into the pit, and as soon as Roland Lee yelled, "Cut!" A squad of rescue experts rushed in. They dropped in a trapeze, and they hoisted him right out of the pit. Despite the fact that the earlier sequel, Bride of Frankenstein, was very successful, Universal allowed 4 years to elapse before they created Son of Frankenstein. The management of Universal Studios was taken over by people who thought that horror films were beneath them. But by the late 30s, another team moved in, and they declared Frankenstein alive and well, or as Colin Clive would say, it's alive. Now this.
The scariest creatures in Hollywood rise from their graves. It's alive! Every Saturday at 3 p.m. on Creepy Classics.